Hello everyone, this is Patrick in the Council Bluffs office. This is actually a re-recording of the webinar we did last Friday. That did not take, so we're recording again in a canned version. Maybe that's just as well. There's a lot of clutter in the background last Friday. A lot of people couldn't figure out how to mute their phones, so this one will be a little cleaner. Hopefully we'll go over the same points and get you the same information in a little better format. So here we go. This material is on our portal. The PowerPoint, the PDF of the PowerPoint that I'm going to go through is on our agent portal. Go to forms and then training forms down the right-hand side. It's the top item in the training form section, so you can print this document out and review it at your leisure, or pause now and print it out, and then you have it in front of you when you listen to this webinar. So this is an overall overview, I guess you will, of the new hemp program. Just came out a couple weeks ago. Not going to be all the details. You can see the documents that contain all the details on the slide, the policy, the insurance standards handbook, the LASH, special provisions, and the actuarial documents. And then we got a couple FAQs that are actually very helpful. RMA has one, and then AgriLogic has one. I know AgriLogic is updating theirs on a regular basis. They're up to 42 questions. The last update was at 26, so it's been a little while, but I know RMA, NCIS, and AgriLogic are all working together to answer questions as quickly as they can, and then post them on a regular basis in those Q&As. So if you have questions, look in those source documents first. If you can't find them, call your normal source for answers, and if they make their way into us and we can answer them, we'll send them on to the people that can. There are a lot that aren't answered, obviously, on a brand new product like this. So, hemp program. Really, the whole idea behind this, once it got hemp got taken off the controlled substance list, was to come up with some sort of crop insurance program to insure it. And there's not a lot of data out there, so really this is a very bare bones product. Everybody knows that. The idea is to build on it as we get more data and enhance the product as we go along. But right now, it's a standard APH plan product. Just covers your standard perils that you would normally think of on an APH plan. And then, of course, there's a lot of exclusions that are unique to hemp, but it's very basic, straightforward APH plan product. This is where it's offered. If you're listening to this webinar, it's because you have the opportunity to write policies in one of these states/counties. It is a Category B crop, and do not expect any kind of expansion probably anytime soon, certainly not this year. Subsidies are pretty straightforward. They're the standard subsidies, so I'm not going to spend much time on that slide. Coverage levels, 50 to 75% and 5% increments. You can elect coverage levels by type, and there's three main types. It's only those three. We'll talk about that a little bit later. You cannot have separate coverage levels for irrigated practice like you can on a lot of crops. No FAC, NFAC variants. It's just straight coverage levels by those three types. There is CAT available. If you take CAT, you have CAT coverage 50-55 on all acres of all the types. So it's CAT on all of the crop or buy-up on all the crop. And the established prices, because they're an APH plan crop, you can elect a percent of price, again by type. Contract pricing, however, is not available, so there's no ability to use the contract price that the insured is going to have written into his contract, and there's no ability to use the contract pricing addendum. And this is just policy language, a little more detail on the whole coverage level information. You have to select the coverage level by type on your application by the sales closing. If you don't select the coverage level for all insurable types and you end up growing another type, then they're going to take the lowest coverage level for the types that you are insuring and apply that to the one that you didn't have on your application. Again, 50-55 on the cat, and the administrative fee is, is $655 per crop per county. And if you choose cat, like I said, it's all insured acreage of the crop in the county. Program dates. Sales closing is March 15th, which will be March 16th this year because the 15th is on a Sunday, so one extra day. That also includes the counties in the states that normally would have a February 28th sales closing date. You can see them on the slide up here. California, North Carolina, and Alabama would normally have a February 28th sales closing. That is extended for this first year to March 15th because it's so late coming out. They're giving everybody till March 15th, which I guess is again March 16th for 2020. Production reporting date has also been extended accordingly, so that's April 29th, your standard date for production reporting on a spring crop in the Midwest. Final planting dates vary. The CBD is generally later, so it'll be toward the end of this time frame. The first final planting date for any of the types is June 15th, and that, of course, varies by region. Acreage reporting is August 15th, which is 30 days later than most of the normal Midwest spring crops. Premium billing, October 1st. End of insurance period, 31st, and contract change date is November 30th. They obviously didn't hit that November 30 date this year, but presumably they will moving forward. The note down there in the box is indication, a rule that says that because the acreage reporting date is August 15th on hemp does not mean the other crops that you could have on your policy that would have a 7/15 date also get extended to 8/15. They made an exception to that standard rule in the policy to say that if you've got, for example, corn and soybeans on your policy and you also have hemp, your corn and soybeans are still due on 7/15. Only the hemp acreage report can come in on 8/15. Here are the types laid out a little differently so you can see a little more detail. Again, the three types are CBD, fiber, and grain. Within those types, you have different practices. Fiber and grain have irrigated and non-irrigated, and then they have the same irrigation practices for the certified and transitional organic. And then when you get into the CBD, there's another level of practices, transplant and direct seeded, and then within those you've got the whole plant and the floral, and then also the irrigated and the transitional practices. So when you look at the actuarials, there's a whole string of insurable types, and that's mostly because of what you see going on right here. But it is all just those three main types when you're choosing your coverage levels by type or your price selection by type. It's just these three, not the combinations that you see when you combine all these together. And this is language from the policy. You can see there's a few types down below in the policy that are not shown up above, and that is presumably so there's expansion ability in the policy without having to rewrite it, which you can see B, E, and F, the dual purpose, the oil, and the other are not insurable types in the actual document. So even though they're showing in the policy special provisions rule, and if it's not in the special provisions, they're not insurable. So again, only those three types. And floral and the whole plant within the CBD type is defined down here as well. Unit structure is pretty straightforward. Enterprise, basic, and optional, no whole farm. And the enterprise is the old standard simple enterprise, all acres of hemp in the county in which you have a share. So we don't have all those gyrations of EUs by practice, irrigation practice, EU by FAC, NFAC, no MCEU. It's really straightforward on the unit structure. Insurability, this is where we get into some rules that are very unique to hemp because of the The fact that we need approval by the state has to be approved by government authorities within the state, in addition to what USDA has done. So insured himself, herself, has to be licensed by the governing authority, either the state, tribe, or USDA, and then insured must provide, when he applies for insurance, acceptable production evidence to verify that he or she has produced a crop in any county in any previous crop year. So that's a requirement for insurability. You have to be licensed, and you have to provide proof that you've grown the crop at least once in the past. And there's a little more detail below on that. And it has to be either you have grown the crop or an SBI of the insured. So when they say evidence, they don't necessarily mean records. They just need to have proof that the crop was grown. You need the records to use them in your production report to get away from variable T yields. The more year of actual, the fewer years of variable T yields you'll have, and we'll talk about that shortly. But this is just talking about proof that they've grown the crop. And then it goes on to say, a record of acceptable production evidence is one that has been documented at any local FSA office. So the simple one here would be, they grew hemp, they reported those acres to FSA at some point in the past, last year, 2 years ago, however many years ago. RMA just wants to have proof that the insured has grown this crop at least once anywhere in any previous crop year. So it doesn't have to be in the county in which he's insuring. It doesn't have to be grown under a contract. So he may have grown it last year and he didn't have a contract. He would have to have a contract this year under the new program, but he would not have had it under contract last year. Final position of the hemp crop in a previous crop year does not matter. What he did with it, if it went hot, whatever the case may be, they just want to know they grew the crop. And then the previous year production acre amounts, the years that he's using to meet this requirement, he does not have to meet the policy minimum acreage requirements that you're going to see on the next slide. If you can't come up with a record of acceptable production evidence from an FSA offices, then and only then can you use a record from the applicable governing authority documenting the official THC testing of hemp grown by the insured. So if FSA records are not available, that's the fallback to prove that you grew it in the past. And then the last poll is just saying all of those rules that are above do apply to BFRs and VFRs. Oftentimes BFRs and VFRs get the benefit of the doubt and their requirements are not as stringent. That is not the case on hemp. So continuing on in insured crop, it's all hemp in the county in which she has a share, grown under a valid process or contract, executed and submitted by the acreage report. So the acres have to be under a process or contract, and we have to have it submitted into us by the acreage reporting date. And then the hemp has to be licensed and meet regulatory requirements of the governing regulatory authority. So sure, it has to be licensed and meeting all those requirements for the state or whatever the authority is, probably the state in most cases. And then if the insured's official certification or license that is allowing him to be insured is terminated or suspended at any time during the crop year, then the crop is no longer insurable. So if he loses that authority, no more insurance, no premium, which is good, or indemnity. So basically the policy just goes void. It has to be planted for harvest as hemp in accordance with the process or contract, an adaptable variety, and then here's those minimum acreage requirements. CBD is 5 acres, grain and fiber are 20. You look at it on a type basis, not a unit basis, so you look at all the acres of that type you have in the county, and that is how we come up with those minimums. And the example is showing the CBD floral is 3 and the CBD whole plant is 3. We're looking at the CBD type, not the practices within the CBD. So once they hit the 5 acres, they hit the minimum and they're good to go. And this goes into a little bit more about the processor contract. The processor contract specifies an amount of acreage or production insurable acreage for the unit will not exceed. And then one of those two items, the first one is if the processor contract is acreage-based, then that is the limit to the number of acres that we can insure. Whatever the acreage in the processor contract states is the upper limit of the acres that we can insure. And if it's a production contract, then we take the result of dividing the amount of production that's in the processor contract by the insured's approved yield, and that's how we get to acres, and that's the maximum number of acres. So you can only insure your contracted acres. Any excess acres would have to be reported as uninsurable. And then this talking about replanting. We haven't got to this yet, but there is no replanting payment for the crop, but we would still follow our standard crop rules. And if it's practical to replant and it's before the final planting date, then we would expect the insured to replant unless we agree it's not practical. And then once we get past the point where it's practical to replant, we do not require them to replant, which is kind of the standard rule. Insured crop cannot be planted with another crop, excluding cover crops. You still have the ability to plant hemp in accordance with the cover crop rules that we've dealt with for the last few years. Can't be planted into established grass or legume. Can't be planted in a greenhouse or physical structure. Those plants have to be transplanted into the field before they can be insured. And then it has to be planted by the final planting date because there's no late planting provisions, and it can't be following another crop or double crop. No matter where you are in the country, that can't happen. And insurance period, beginning and end date, pretty common verbiage here. Key here is begins on the later of when we accept your app or the date when the crop is planted in the field. So until it goes in the field, it's not covered if you're transplanting. And then some language out of the Insurance Standard Handbook, and this is also in the policy, but some additional requirements when it comes to acreage reporting. All your standard requirements plus for this crop, they have to report the applicable land location identifier in 6C, which is CLU, farm tract and field, which is pretty common now. But this is new, including GPS coordinates and certification and license number. So two really important items here. The GPS coordinates of the fields and then the certification and license number of the insured. So we're redoing our acreage report to allow room to put those GPS coordinates on each field, and then one spot on the acreage report to put the certification and license number that every insured is required to have. And then submit to us on or before the acreage reporting date a copy of that certification form and license number and the processor contract. So all that has to come in up front by the acreage reporting date. And then again, a reminder that that later acreage reporting date for hemp does not extend the acreage reporting date for the other crops on the policy. Rotation requirements. Those are shown in the Insurance Standards Handbook. They vary by state, so find your state up here and you'll see the rotation requirements. Most of the crops are the same between all the states, but there's some variance. They all do include hemp, so you can't plant hemp after hemp, at least this first year. And there's another group of states, you've lost some of the rotation limitations, but there's still several here, so just make sure you're aware of that. These also show in the special provisions. And then here's all the items that are not covered that I've kind of referred to up to this point in time, and really all the bells and whistles that we're used to on an APH planted crop are set to the side for at least the first year. I assume at some point some of these will start coming into play, but Again, they wanted to start out very simple, very bare bones, and that's what is not available this year. So a whole lot of not available items. APH determination, a little bit on that. We look at dry pounds of hemp and the moisture percents in the lash. Came out and showed the adjustment would be 9% for grain and 10% for CBD with no adjustment for fiber. And then any year in which the crop is destroyed due to high THC, that's not insurable. That also gets plugged into a APH database in the year it happens with a zero. So you get a zero yield. Not a zero year, it's a zero yield, which obviously has an adverse effect on the APH database for that insured for many years to come. So staying under that minimum THC amount is very important for coverage and APH down the road. And there's a few considerations to keep in mind on APH. There's no new producer provisions available. We talked about that. Most producers have relatively few years of production history just because it's only been legal for a short period of time. So APH yields are going to be based on variable T yields. In most cases, it's going to be less than 100% of the T. I'd be real surprised to see any databases this first year that have 100% of the T. To get 100% of the T, you'd have to have at least 3 years of actual records for the crop in the county. That's the variable T yield concept. Most of them are going to have 1 or 2, I'm guessing, at most. So your APHs are going to be set up with 1 or 2 years of actual, and then a T yield that is less than the T yield that is posted in the actual documents. Those are 100% T yields. Not very many people are going to get 100% T yield on any database for 2020. And then another item that came to light while answering some questions has to do with new breaking. Most of our common crops have that new breaking language in the special provisions that allows the companies to approve coverage on new breaking ground without having to go to the RO. It's that new breaking acreage insurability request, but that language is not in the special provisions for hemp. So you combine that with the fact that there can be no written agreements for RO that go to the RO for hemp, and the end result of that is what you see in red, which is not on the handout that I put on the portal. I got interrupted mid-thought apparently and didn't get back to the slide, but the end result of all that is that hemp on new breaking acreage that first year is uninsurable. It's got to be planted and harvested within one of the last 3, and if they haven't done that on new breaking, they don't have any ability to request insurance like we do on our standard crops. So keep that in mind as well. These are standard covered causes of loss that you would see in about every crop. And then more importantly on hemp is what's not covered. We touched on this, but this lays it out pretty clearly, and this is in the policy and the insurance standard handbook. If the hemp goes hot and you exceed that 0.3% THC level on a dry weight basis, then there's no coverage for that crop. It has to be destroyed, and there's no coverage. Any kind of quality deficiencies are not covered under the policy, so there is no quality. The only one that they're talking about here, 15J in the basics, is the language that says if a federal or state authority requires destruction because the crop is injurious to human or animal health, then that is the only quality adjustment that's available under hemp. Failure to follow requirements in the process or contract, inability to market for any reason is not covered. So we can't pay an indemnity if they can't market due to quarantine, boycott, process or contract default, or refusal of any person to accept production. So a lot of these things have happened in the last couple of years of some of these hemp growers. and those are not covered cause of losses. And this slide is coming from the Insurance Standards Handbook, and I think it's in the special provisions as well. This is talking about testing for that THC level of 0.3%, and what our leeway is, I guess, if you will. They call it a measurement of uncertainty. So these contracts are going to have a measurement of uncertainty relative to that 3.3% THC level. So the maximum acceptable level and measurement of uncertainty are established in accordance with the Farm Bill of 2018, and then if the test results provided by the tester laboratory do not include a measure of uncertainty, the measure of uncertainty is 0%. So a couple examples. Production meets the THC level. The federal max is 0.3. The testing lab sample result shows 0.35. So we're over the 0.3, but the measurement of uncertainty from that lab is 0.05. So you take 0.05 from this 0.35, which means you're going down to 0.3 up to 0.4. So this sample is within the acceptable THC level of 0.3 because it falls right in the middle. It's 0.35. So this one's still okay. This one, however, falls outside that range. It's still got the 0.3. The lab sample results show 0.35, but this lab has a measure of uncertainty of only 0.04. So that makes the range 0.31 to 0.39, and the sample is outside the maximum THC level of 0.3 because it's 0.31. So that one does not have the ability to meet the THC level, so that would be loss of production due to an uninsured cause of loss. So these labs have these measures of uncertainty, and if they're listed, we utilize them in this determination. If they don't have a measurement of uncertainty, there is no leeway. It's got to be 0.3 or under. And then duties in the event of damage or loss. Again, some of these are unique to hemp. Some of them are pretty standard. The first one, of course, is unique to hemp because you have to provide at loss time a copy of that certification form or official license for the current year for the applicable insured county. So we need it up front, and we need it again at loss time. Presumably that's to make sure it's still in effect and it hasn't been pulled. So they have to provide that up front, and again at loss time. Protect the crop from further damage by providing sufficient care. Notify your crop insurance agent within 42 hours. That's pretty standard. Representing the samples is pretty standard. Insured acreage for the insured type is damaged due to the insurance period by an insured cause of loss, and you intend to harvest the acreage before the final THC level is determined by the governing authority. You must provide us notice. So some notice requirements in the policy that are unique to hemp, and the requirement to determine that THC level. So these last two are referring to that, and that's information out of the policy and the lash. And this is talking about how we handle appraisals on claims not taken to harvest. So the methodology that will be used to appraise at the different stages of development and the different types. So we won't belabor that, but it's in there for you to look at. And then a couple slides on claims, and again, the lash contains a lot of detail, and the claims area is probably the area that's got the least amount of detail on it and the most questions right now. This is talking about if it's deferred to harvest, an insured cause of loss occurs during harvest and is deferred, then the insured has to notify us and allow an inspection prior to harvesting, and if the crop is determined to be hot and he doesn't notify us, then that's destroyed without consent. And this slide is a little vague, and we've asked for some clarifications on this one. So this is talking about a claim deferred to harvest and how the THC level will influence, and again, this is spelled out better in the policy, and we're asking for some clarifications, but if the insured crop exceeds THC levels and there's insured cause of loss, then the appraisal is used for production to count, but the zero will be entered in the insured's APH database. We touched on that earlier. If it's insured cause of loss and it meets the acceptable THC levels, obviously we would use the harvested production for production to count, and they would get to put that harvested production in the insured's APH database. And then on sold production, how are we going to measure that? That's laid out in the lash as well. If it's grain, it's bin. If it's fiber, it's bale. And if it's CBD, it's going to be weight of bales or sacks adjusted for moisture or for stock if harvested as a whole plant. So a little more detail on the loss side, and again, a lot of clarifications needed on that. So the next few slides in your handout I'm not going to go over because they are examples of quoting, and so we ran a few quotes and put them in here, but our quoting system is up and running. Keep in mind that when you do quote hemp, you're going to have yields in your databases. Those yields are going to be 100%, so there'll be a way to adjust that in Easy Quote, obviously, but the yields that you're seeing here are the 100% yields, and very few people are going to have those. So a lot of variance in price on types and on states, as you might imagine. So run the quotes in your area and get a good handle on what it's costing, and you should be able to help the insured make a decision on what he wants to do. So with that, I think that's the end of the material. Obviously can't ask questions because there's nobody really on the line here with me, but just a reminder that there are good resources out there, the policy and the documents, plus there's QAs, and they're going to be updated frequently. I was just on a call today with RMA and NCIS, and they are making a concerted effort to get all the questions gathered, sent in, discuss, make sure everybody's in agreement, and then issued back out. And it sounds like probably the entity that's keeping things most up to date is probably AgriLogic. So presumably all the questions that you're seeing on the AgriLogic Q&A have been vetted through NCIS and RMA as well. So more on that as it transpires and things go along. But hopefully this helped you and you were able to get some information that you didn't have before. Again, if you have questions, go to your next line of authority that you would ask them of, and we'll just keep moving them up the chain until we can get them answered. So with that, have a good rest of the day, whatever time of day it is, and we will talk to you somewhere down the road. Thank you.